And then one more thing to demonstrate, and then I'll shut up and close this video, is the upload, which I had been asked by some people to do a granular patch or release this, which has been sort of sitting around for a little while, but at that point it was only for specified numbers of channels. Now it is for well, anything between 1 and 32 channels. So go down to enchant samp and to upload, and you can specify how many output channels you want. So I'm going to use 8 because I've been using 8 before. And it also asks you how many voices your computer can cope with. It doesn't use poly tilde, but it does make independent voices. So this is basically asking you how many voices or how many grains can be happening concurrently, and it will depend on how good your computer is as to how many you can do. So I'm going to put in 150. I could probably cope with quite a few more, but I will do 150 for now. And it takes a little while, but it will make that. So again, we've got 8 channels of output and some throughs for the inputs. But the sound generation on this is by means of a stereo input. So I will find a stereo sound. I don't actually want this particular sound, but it's in a folder where I do want some sounds. That's going to be in the way now. There we go. So you need to load a sound, so you go into the sound loader, which you can either click on this button or you can press L, and it will. So once again, if you want instructions, go Control, Alt and Command or equivalent, and it will tell you. So it's got your modular shortcuts there. And you can drag in a sound that you want. So I will drag in, what should I drag in? I will drag in paper. Where is it? Paper scrunch. So drag that into that space. And this is a kind of hub, this loader. So if you've got a much longer file, the clipping will only accommodate, or the granulation bit will only accommodate, I think, either up to 30 seconds or up to a minute. I think it looks like it's up to a minute. But you choose how much of that you want to load, and it could be quite a small amount. So if you wanted to do some very detailed work on a small section of a sound file, particularly if you wanted to do granular time stretching or something like that on a segment of a file, then you can specify a very small amount of it. I shall choose most of it actually. And you can audition it from here, but you load it. Hello, is it? Yes, it's done it. So now I can come out of my sound loader and it's loaded that section of the file down here. And then the rest of the parameters are common to most granulation tools. So you have intergrain length, so length of time between grains. You have grain length itself. You have transposition of grains. You have, well, in this case, you have spatialization of grains, which I will talk maybe about very shortly. And then you have grain start position, so whereabouts in the file the grain will be read from. So you can either do that by specifying a very particular point within the file, or you can make a range from it, for it to go from. And I've been using this. You'll notice that there is this kind of common system that I'm using, which enables you to choose a range and then move that range around. Which is, I mean, very kind of similar to what you can do with the range slider object, but it just well, it's just the way I've done it. There was an advantage, and I've forgotten what it was. So yeah, we can start uploading, except that nothing comes out. Why is that? Because the outputs aren't being sent anywhere. Where do the outputs need to go? Well, you could send them directly to your your outputs here, but depending on how your speakers are configured, that may not work ideally. So the idea with this is to either connect it to a matrix object, so that you can connect the outputs of your grains to particular objects, or sorry, particular physical outputs, or you can use orbit again, and this is kind of the way I conceived it. So we'll have 8 input channels and 8 output channels. But the way I'm going to configure the inputs and outputs are not going to be the same. The inputs I shall leave as they are, because what will happen is that each grain, each stereo grain, will be positioned so that its left channel will be, for example, here, and its right channel will be quite close to it. So basically between 2 sets of outputs in terms of how they come out of these outlets here. So if you're playing it back into a circle of 8 speakers, and you were using the configuration that I tend to use, which is out into the circle 8 like that, so again stereo pair model, then that it works best to do it like that. So we'll come out of there, and then we can change the orientation so that the inputs match up with the outputs if I want them to, and I can change the amplitude so that it's kind of, they sit more on top of the speakers. And then if I want to go back to the speakers again, I can change the speaker influence, which is here, such that you don't get too much bleed between speakers. But then you might want bleed between grains in terms of how they are mapped to the speakers, but it does give you that kind of flexibility to do that. I hope that makes sense. I think probably if you play with it, you'll figure out what's going on. So lock that, and lock that, and then you can notice, incidentally, that back in this connector object, Easy Connect, if you click on the connect to and from you menus, the new objects haven't been added yet, so we need to go back and click on this again, whereupon they will be. And so now we can go from Plode to Orbit and connect those, and then we can go from Orbit to Master and connect those. There we go, and we have some sound.